Including right now, this is the border between New South Wales and Victoria. This is Albury-Wodonga, and this is the border that 3 hours from now will have police at that very spot. Police stopping people from moving from one part of Australia to another part of Australia. Now, we fought for weeks to make sure that these things did not happen when the borders were there between the twin towns of Tweed Heads and Coolangatta in Queensland, yet it has been repeated and will happen again tonight. There will be hundreds of police and Defence Force personnel who will be going to patrol this border and will also, as you heard with Alan a little bit earlier, have drones in the sky to watch people who apparently will get coronavirus in Housing Commission towers in Melbourne, and then the second they get it, they'll hop in a car, drive as close as they can to the border, then run into the bush, then swim through the Murray River, and then somehow come out the other side, of which a people smuggler will then pick them up and drive them right out the front of the Premier's house. Apparently that's what's happening because there's no other logic as to why this border is about to be closed. I'll explain why in a second. Movement between Sydney and Melbourne, or Melbourne and Sydney, OK, I can understand. But most of that traffic is, of course, done via the air. You can't book a ticket without saying what your address is. Pretty obviously, if you're in one of the lockdown suburbs, or sadly, Greater Melbourne and the Mitchell Shire as well, you wouldn't be able to buy a ticket. But the idea that we're going to spend how much money and how much time for how many weeks to stop people swimming through the Murray River is ridiculous. And yet again, because someone somewhere, the unelected bureaucrat, scares the elected politician, with only a day and a bit's notice, people's lives are completely torn apart. No consultation, no conversation about how this thing works, and even after, wider Melbourne has been locked down and will be locked down from tomorrow night at midnight and will be so for the next 6 weeks, the system's not being delayed, even though there is no permit system that currently exists. People in Albury-Wodonga have no idea what paperwork they need, whether you need paperwork to leave New South Wales to come back into New South Wales. There are stories of people who live in Albury but then need to drop the kids off to a former partner in Wodonga and vice versa. There's real-life consequences to these decisions, and local mayors are blowing up, quite correctly.
Two of us, our council should have been consulted early days, like even Friday. Look, this is getting worse. We need to consider Plan B.
Now, why do I say there is no need for this hard border to be policed? And by the way, it's just as ridiculous on the South Australian border with Victoria. They will be using, again, the ADF to guard people who apparently, the second they start to get a scratchy throat in Melbourne, will apparently immediately hop on the motorbike and try to make their way over to wine country. It's ludicrous. Why? Because these two maps tell the story that regional Australia does not need to be punished yet again. The dark blue is where the virus exists in New South Wales. It doesn't exist in regional New South Wales. It doesn't exist on the Albury side. There were 2 cases, but any serious number. And on the Victorian side, again, we've shown you this for weeks. Again, red is the problem, everything else isn't. On the Wodonga side, there is no problem with the virus. Yet rather than coming up with a system where clearly border towns like Tweed Heads and Coolangatta should have some free movement, and if you're going to patrol a border, you do it a little bit further up, and anyone with a New South Wales plate, you pull over in Queensland, or a Victorian one, you pull over when it goes into New South Wales. Instead, the locals are the ones who are about to be desperately inconvenienced. I repeat, regional Australia has had no experience with this virus. The experiences that they have had have, of course, come through overseas travellers through the main cities, and then via, be it the Ruby Princess or something else, they end up in the trouble that they are currently in. Their lives will be turned upside down and there's no end date in sight. Hence why locals are blowing up today, and rightly so.
Well, we're staying in Albury. We came to visit family. My 86-year-old mother wants to see her grandkids, some of whom she hasn't seen, like great-grandkids, and, yeah, really annoyed. Why could they have not told us on the weekend? But yeah, I mean, why couldn't they put a ring around Melbourne? That's where the problem is. Makes more sense.
It's a bit tough for the people who work from Wodonga in Albury.
I reckon it's pretty silly, to be honest, because they haven't even got a permit or anything organised for anyone that works over here in Albury. I live in Wodonga, and I do a lot of roadworks and stuff in Albury, so it's going to be very hard for a lot of people, I think.
They had to do something about it, but I think it's a bit unfair on Albury-Wodonga to have to bear a bit of the brunt of that decision.
These country towns have already had to live with the social distancing rules and the lack of access to restaurants, a pub, limited trade, all the rest of it, no intrastate travel for a long period of time, and they've done so for months on end. And now here we go again. Thankfully, there is at least one thing to giggle about this border nonsense, and I don't know whether this guy's taking the piss or not, but it was fun to watch. This was a bloke who decided to gate crash somebody who was talking to Channel 9. How's this for a quiet Australian?
Me personally, I don't
Well,
work.
not really good. Sir, I don't really give a f***.
Okay, good.
You know, I'm in lockdown.
Yeah,
Now, what do you reckon?
yeah,
Hey?
yeah.
Mate, I live here, and you try to lock me out of bloody Wodonga and Albury? How am I supposed to get a Centrelink? No, that's what I'm really worried about, you know?
More of them on air, please. Remember, compulsory voting includes that dear man. As much as you pay attention, he gets just as much as say, and he should be able to freely move wherever the heck that he wants because he's in an area that doesn't have the problem. Remember, now is the time for the scalpel, not the hammer. Now is the time to be able to do the surgical things around suburbs or wider cities rather than whole states. Because normal people get completely screwed over, and you'd think they'd delay the system until they at least worked out what you need to do. It took the best part of a week for that to be the case in the crossing between Queensland and New South Wales. How long is it going to take now when the border, in less than 3 hours, closes between Victoria and New South Wales?